1 year ago I made a poker scene and it looks like this. Not my proudest work, but also not bad. So today we are going to make a better poker scene in under an hour. We're going to model a cool looking glass, randomize poker chips with geometry nodes, and make our own light texture to enhance the value of the scene. Chapters can be found in the description if you're only interested in certain parts of this tutorial. Let's get started. So today we are making a poker scene and it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive right into it. It probably won't take a lot of time because it's a close-up render and you can do those pretty quick. So first of all, I'm going to start by making the table. I will delete the default cube. Haha, no, I will not. So I will scale this down on the Z axis, then make it a little bit bigger, S, Y, and scale it like so. Maybe just a bit bigger, something like this, SX. And now we've got a pretty decently sized table. So I am going to press Ctrl A and click on the apply scale. So now the scale is applied, which means basically that it is just 1 by 1 by 1 dimensions on the scale. Doesn't really matter that much for this instance, but once you apply bezels, it will become important. So first of all, it's also important for the inset. And I'm going to select this face by going over into edit mode and pressing on 3. And then I'm going to press I and bring this inwards. Now I am going to bring this down by pressing E, something like this. And I'm going to select this entire edge loop around the table and press S. I'm going to have it come to the inside just a little bit more, just kind of like a pool table. And now what I can do is go over to the modifier tab, add a modifier, type bevel, and we've got a bevel on this. Increase the segments and decrease the amount, something like this. Now, very good. That is pretty much the base of our table. I'm not even sure whether we are going to make the bottom side of it. It probably won't be visible. So I am going to make a glass, a cylinder right over here, bring it upwards by holding Control. You can place it exactly on this grid line. And right now I will set this to 3D cursor so I can scale it down a little bit and make this a reasonable size in comparison to our table. So I think a glass should be something like this, which is a pretty common size for a glass. First of all, I am going to take this face, press I, go over here, maybe bring this upwards just a little bit, G and Z, press I again, and then I'm going to press E and bring it all the way down until it's pretty much over here. Very good. Then I'm going to select this dash button and this will isolate our object. And now I can select the bottom part, press I, and let's go ahead and do something like this. Then press I again, something like this, and I will bring this upwards just a little bit, not too much. And then I am going to make a loop cut, 2 of them. As set, scale it, oh, we still got it on 3D cursor, so I'm going to set it to median point. As set, I want this to be a little bit bigger, but I don't want it to touch the bottom. I'm going to press G and Z and bring it downwards just a little bit like this. And here I'm going to make an interesting pattern for our glass. So right over here, I'm going to press Ctrl R, add a bunch of loop cuts like this. I like to have a little bit of detail. And now I can select this, 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 this. And by the way, if you want to know how to select these edges instead of these, it's dependent on where you click. So I hold Shift and Alt and I click near this line in the middle. And then it will select this part, while if you select this part in this middle line, then it will go upwards. Just a little trick that you can use. So right over here, I have all my lines selected. And now I can go over to face and select poke faces. And now we've got it poked. I'm going to do that one more time. And we get a pretty cool and complex looking shape right there. And we're going to use that to make our glass have a very cool texture, especially when you have a glass texture on it as well. So I'm going to press 1. And now I will select this vertice, go over to select similar amount of adjacent faces. And now it will select all the dots that has the same amount of adjacent faces, which aren't a lot of them over here, but all of them over here. So right now, what we can do is press Alt-S, and we can bring this towards ourselves. And Alt-S scales on the normals. And a normal is basically where a face is directed to. So if we scale with Alt-S, it will scale it on all the normals of this object. Very good. So now we've got a pretty interesting looking shape, and I can already imagine that this feels pretty nice in your hands. Now, this is the hard part, at least for the machine, not for me. I'm going to press on save first. So I'm going to call this Pokertable 1. Save Blender file. And then I'm going to press on Ctrl 2, which is a shortcut to add a subdivision surface modifier. And now we've got that. I'm going to shade it smooth by pressing right click and clicking shade smooth. And as you can see, we have our glass. But there are some things about it that I do not like, namely this. So I'm going to select the middle face right over here, and you can see that when you turn it off like this. Press I, and now that we have extra geometry over here, it's actually a lot more sharp. So we can see that over there. Now, over here, maybe I am going to add another one like this. So you get this edge that is pretty common to have in a glass. So first of all, I'm going to this tab, the vertex groups, and select normals. And now we have a pretty decent looking glass. Very cool. I can press on dash once again, and we're back at our table scene. And now that we've got this cool looking glass, I'm going to shift it over right over there, G and Y. And now we need to make some poker chips. Very cool, poker chips. But actually, let's make the card first because it's a little bit easier. Shift A, mesh, plane, SX. Make sure it's around the size of a card, like this. I'm going to select everything. And since we are in vertices mode, which you can see right over here, vertices, edges, and faces, you cannot simply bevel this by pressing Ctrl B. It actually won't do a lot. But if you press Ctrl Shift and B, you can bevel these edges like so. Add some extra geometry by scrolling on your mouse wheel. And this is pretty much the shape of a card. Now all we need is a texture for this card. And we need our chips. And I think then we can have a pretty good render already. This is also quite low resolution, but it works. So I'm going to take this one. We can go back into Blender and make some cards. So I'm heading over into the viewport mode. And as you can see, nothing has been textured, which is fine. I'm just going to drag this up, go to the shader editor, new, go to the principled BSDF, click on Ctrl T, open. And in the downloads folder, I can select my cards. So we have our king card. So let's make the king first. Then I'm heading over into edit mode, U, and Q projection. Then into the UV editor, UV. Let's see what this looks like. It's rotated on the wrong side. So I'm going to press R and 90, and now it's rotated fine. S, X, and bring it like so. S, Y, and bring it upwards until it fills the entire card. So now this looks like a card a little bit more. Could be better, but there are some other things that we can do later on. No problem. First I'm going to add a solidify modifier right over here and add a little bit of thickness to this. So something like this. I mean, it has to be very thin, so don't go overboard with this. But we've got our card, which is nice. So I'm going to duplicate it, G and Y. And maybe do that 2 more times. And just 1 more time. So I'm going to select this one, go over to the shader editor, click here to make a new material. So now it's copied and it's actually a duplicate of this one, but we can change it. So open up, card, and the queen. Ah, it fits perfectly, nice. So that didn't cost a lot of trouble. So right here I'm going to do the same for this one. Copy this, open up, card, ace. And this one could be better, so I'm heading over into the UV editor, go into edit mode, and let's see, it's actually scaled too much on the Y. I'm going to bring that back just a little bit, and a little bit on the X as well. And now it looks pretty cool. Going over into this one, back to the shader editor, new, open this up, card, make it blue, and this fits pretty nicely actually, so I'm going to leave it like that. And for this one, I'm going to make it red, of course. Red card, PNG, right over there. This one doesn't fit, probably because we converted it from WebP to PNG. UV editor, heading over into edit mode. And as you can see, it's way too big and it's taking a lot of the white space as well. SX and SY, and make sure that it fits a bit more. And I like it to be even on all sides, so something like this should do. Pretty cool. So now we've got our cards. I'm going to place them into a collection. Collection cards. Name them accordingly. This is the king. Oh, the red back. All right, very cool. So we've got that. I'm going to scoof this out of the way for now. Let's bring it somewhere over here. And now we can make our geometry node setup for the, or actually we need to make it first. So let's go ahead and do that. We have our cylinder, add mesh, cylinder, bring it upwards, set it to 3D cursor, bring it down on the Z axis, something like this. And of course this is very large for a poker chip. So I'm just going to bring it like that. And maybe what we can do already is select this and give it a material, new, assign, Control I to invert the selection, make a new material, new, assign. And right now I'm pressing on 7. We're still in the viewport mode. So I'm going over into the shader editor and Control T, open, downloads, poker chip, and add it. Now I can use the cube projection once again. It kind of fits nicely. It's not entirely there yet, so we're going into the UV editor. I'm going to select it like this, maybe scale it a little bit smaller, bring it upwards, downwards, and make sure it just fits on the entire cylinder, like so. And now this is a poker chip. I hope we have the same on the back side as well, and that is the case. So I'm heading over back into the shader editor, and first I want to test if I can change the color by adding a hue, saturation and value node. And right over here, the white color shouldn't change, but this color can change. So that is great. So we don't have to take any other images from Google and search for the blue one and the green one, etc. So there's probably a better method to do this. I mean, what you could do is add a new material, then assign it, then right over here, make some loop cuts like this. Then give it this material, and do this for all the parts, like over here as well, and over there, and over here, and over there. Do this for all the white parts, like so, like so. I need it like this, and like this. Like this and like this, and then select all the white parts like this, like so. This one is not included, like this, and assign it, then press Control I and deselect the top and bottom. Press on new, select, and assign. So then what you can do is you can go over into this material, Control T, open, and add our poker chip. And now we cannot see anything, and that is because we need to unwrap it. Unwrap, go to the UV editor, and right here we have all the white areas, I believe. So I'm just going to leave it white, like this, on this part. And now you can see it's going over into that part, and then we're going over into this. And File, Shader Editor, Control T, add a poker chip, downloads, poker chip. And once again, go over to the UV editor, in edit mode, and go and select the red part. Now, going over into this material, select our hue and the saturation value, copy it, go over to this, bring it over here, Control V, and smack it right in the middle. And now it is aligned perfectly, and if it is not, such as over here, we can simply select this line, GG, and move it like so. And now it is aligned. Pretty good, but you can also use the other method. I see I have one selected over here, that should have been this one. Here to the UV editor. We missed a part, so right now it's over here. And in this fashion you can make it a little bit better than I did with my wave texture. But that's just what you can do. Either way, we have our poker chip, and I'm quite happy with it. So I'm just going to add a subsurface division modifier, Control 2, select the top and the bottom, press I, and have it sit somewhere over there. Control R, 2 loop cuts over here, and instead of scaling it on the 3D cursor, we can set it to median point once again, Control Z, and right now we have a pretty decent looking poker chip. So we have to add these poker chips to the geometry node stack. What geometry node stack? Indeed, there isn't one yet, so I'm going to add a plane, and over here I'm going to add this new viewport, select geometry node editor, press on N to remove that annoying box, press new, and right now we have our group input. Now, what I want to add is I want to remove this by holding Alt and clicking on it. Then I'm going to select this, press on curve line, set it right over here, and add it to the geometry. And as you can see, a little curved line is appearing right over here. And we can determine the length of this, something like so. And then it becomes pretty tall, and this makes it smaller. I know that a lot of people are struggling with geometry nodes, so I want to explain this. But there is a point A and a point B, and it is determined by this line. Now on this line, we are going to add a whole bunch of points. And on these points, I want to bring my poker chips, so that the line determines where the poker chips are. Then we are going to offset the poker chips one by one to make it look randomized, and everything will look good. So the curve line, this is what it does. We have a point A and a point B, or 0 to 1. So right now, resample curve, what this does, it allows you to make more points on this curve. And it's kind of hard to see, but there are now 10 points on this curve, as you can see by the resample curve count. Now what do I want to do? I've got my poker chip over here, and I'm going to name it accordingly. Poker chip. Select the curve once again, and drag the poker chip into our geometry nodes workspace. Then I want to add an instance on points right over here. And what do we want to instance on these points? Well, it's the geometry of our poker chip. And as you can see, it has indeed distributed the poker chip on our curved line. So we can now decrease the length of this curved line. Don't mind this poker chip, it was there before. So we can now decrease the endpoint of this curved line like this. And all the poker chips are stacked on top of each other, like so. And we can add the amount of poker chips by adding the count. But then they are kind of intersecting with each other, so we can increase the set once more. Now, that's a little bit of fiddling and playing around with. Either way, we can now randomize the location of this poker chip set. So what I want to do is Shift A, set position, right over here. And I want to offset the position. So I'm also going to add a random value node, because I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm going to have the machine do it for me. I'm going to plug this into the offset, and as you can see, everything is moved around. Now, this is quite a lot. So we do not want it to happen on all of these axes, and that is what's happening right now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press Shift A, combine X, Y, Z, and plug this one into the X. And what do we have? We can now move some of these on the X-axis, and it will be randomized a little bit, simply by changing the minimum and maximum value. Now, this is not the only thing that I want to do, because if we head over into this viewport section, you can see that all the white lines are on the same axis. So we want to rotate the poker chips depending on which poker chip it is. And we're also going to use a random value for that. I'm basically just going to copy this, place it over here. Then I'm going to press Shift A, rotate instances. I'm going to plug it right on the end. And this one, I'm going to rotate it only on the Z-axis, which is the axis like this. And I don't want to rotate it like this or like this or like this. So I'm just going to set this one into the Z-axis. And now what this does, the random value only operates on the Z-axis. So let's go and plug it into the rotation. And as we can see, something is already happening. And this is what we want. So we can now decrease or increase the minimum and maximum value. But one thing that I want to do is make sure that we can reuse this setup for other colors of this poker chip. So how am I going to do that? It's very simple actually. We are going to head on over into our group input. And right over here we have a little line, and we can select these random values, the min. And now we can press on N, and we can change the name of this output. So let's change the name of this by double clicking over here and call it min position. Now it's called min position on our group input as well. We're going to do that for the maximum position. Going to call this max position. Now I also want to have this in the rotation. So I'm going to plug this in and that in, min rot and max rot for minimum and maximum rotation. And what does this do, you ask? No problem, I'm going to explain. Let's click over here. Then into the modifiers tab, we have our geometry nodes, which can now be manipulated in the modifier itself. So we can move around our different poker chips and we can rotate them as well in order to have it be a little bit more diverse like that. So that is what we have done right now. So we've made one set of poker chips right over here, and we can make another one. Simply duplicate it, D and Y, then duplicate the geometry node setup right over here. And we need to change this poker chip for another poker chip. So we do actually have to make different colors. Duplicate our original poker chip, Shift D and Y, then go over here into our shader editor, like this. Duplicate this one as well. Change the hue to something you like. I'm going to set it to the red that we had originally. And now we have to place our poker chip 001 into the second geometry node slot, like this. Delete this one and to remove it, go for the instances. And now it looks exactly the same. And one thing I did not take into account is that our poker chip now has the wrong color on this material as well. Quite annoying, but not the greatest problem in the world. I'm just going to select this, go over to this blue one and copy it as well, set it to 0.5. Very good. So now we have red poker chips, blue poker chips, and maybe we also want some green poker chips. So I'm going to duplicate this once more, duplicate this color and change it to like green. Yeah, something like that. Maybe we can increase the saturation just a little bit, not too much, something like that. And it's on 0.84. And I'm going to do the same for this one, duplicate it, 0.84. And increase the saturation just a little bit. Something like that. And now we also have green poker chips. First of all, these are the same length. And I do not like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the height of this one. And now we also need to decrease the sample count for this to make sense. Something like so, until they actually stack up on each other. And we can change the different values for their rotation. Something like this, like that. Make it go like this, or something like so. Maybe what we also can do is plug this one into the Y as well. And now it will also be offset on a different axis. We can also do that for this one, like so. And now it's actually being offset on different axes. So let's change the position of this, something like this. Very good. We can change the seed as well, see what we like. I like this, this is pretty good. Going to select this one, D and Y, duplicate our geometry node setup, then take our poker chip 002, bring it in there, delete this one, geometry into the instance, and now we have green poker chips as well. Very easy stuff. So I'm going to remove all of these by bringing them to the side, somewhere over here. And I want to think about the render setup now. So this is pretty large. I don't think that is the correct way that this should be scaled. So I'm going to select the pivot point once more. We're going to remove our geometry node setup for now. I'm going to select the pivot point, set it to 3D cursor once again. I'm going to select all of these and scale it down until it's a reasonable size. Well, compared to the glass, I think this is a reasonable size. So right now I'm going to place it somewhere over here. Give them all a bit of a randomized position. Something like so, something like this, something like this. And maybe we want to think about our camera setup. So I'm going to place this one right over there. And I want one foreground element. It's going to be this one. It's going to set it right over there. And Control, Alt, 0. And I think this would be a pretty cool camera setup. Maybe we can make it look down a little bit like this. Something like so, G and Y, have this be a little bit more in the front. I'm going to give this a glass texture, just press on new. I'm not going to do my usual setup, I'm actually just going to add in a glass BSDF. plug it into the surface. It doesn't look very good because we are in the Eevee mode, so we can check it out in cycles. Cycles, it looks pretty decent, I guess. Nothing wrong with this. One thing we can do is we can add a little bit of drink to our glass because, well, why not? So Shift S, cursor to selected, mesh, cylinder, add a cylinder, scale it down, bring it somewhere over there. And I do not want it to be filled all the way. Just going to set it right over here or something. Something like that. Give it a subdivision, Control 2. Then make sure that it's a lot harder. So Control R, bring it up, bring it down. Make it a Y, like this. Then I'm going to select the glass, go to materials, copy material to selected. Now when we press on this tab, this is also glass, but we can copy it right over here, change the color to, I don't know what you're drinking. Maybe you're drinking like wine, something like that. And I think an orange color like so will do just fine. Not bad at all. So now we have our drink with our poker chips, and all that's really missing is kind of a background, and the poker table should be textured as well. And our cards can be placed on the table. So let's do the cards first. Just going to scoop them over, grab them, bring them over here. They should be smaller. Something like this. I'm not entirely sure. If you want to do this on scale, just get some references and do it like that. I'm just going to make a fast render. So I'm just going to place it right on the table. Bring this one a little bit backwards. Don't forget the drink. G and Y. And this one is just a little bit on the table. What we can do as well, by the way, I like the blue one. I like the way the red one looks as well. So I'm going to place the red one like so, something like this. Then I will place my 3D cursor right over here and then rotate it until it's actually on the table, on this side. Yep. And now I'm going to select this card, and I kind of like it like that. The queen is placed on a cool location as well. And we can see a little bit of card right through this. Either way, this is all being lit up by a point light right now, and I'm still struggling with the size, but I think like one of these poker chips should fit into a card 2 times, so I think that is fine actually. I'm not going to be bothered by it too much. Maybe the glass can be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to select the middle part, the glass itself, scale it up ever so slightly, something like this. And maybe I want it to be on the thirds, or maybe I want it to be in the middle. Something like this. Let's go over here. Let's turn off our world lighting for a second and see what we've got. All right, so this entire scene is being lit by the original point light of our scene. I never liked the point light, the original point light. Just going to delete it. Bring an area lamp right over here, and let's see what we can achieve with this. All right, it's already starting to look pretty cool already. Not bad at all. So if I think about this, this is probably going to work out fine. First of all, the table. So I'm going to select the table. I want this part to be green. So I'm going to select the material, add a new one, and click Assign, New Assign. Control I to invert the selection, plus New Assign. So for this one, I'm going to select the wood texture. I'm just going to click on the Principled BSDF, Control Shift T, and I am heading over into my Blender tab, Blender Wood 62. Pretty cool. Just going to select Wood 62. Doesn't look very good, so I'm just going to Q project it. That already looks a lot better, but I think it's a bit harsh. I'm going to scale it up on the UV editor, like this. Maybe it's starting to look pretty good, but it's still a little bit big. So scale it up. I think the entire table can be placed down just a little bit. G and C, something like this, and make it a little bit more natural. Now for the green texture right over here, I'm going to select it, go over to the shader editor, and I want to select 2 types of green colors, which are going to be determined by the noise texture. Control T on the object, and right here, factor into the base color. And as we can see, this is what our noise texture looks like. Now it's way too much, 1. And now this is starting to look pretty cool. Maybe a little bit more, something like this. And Control Q, for me at least, I use different shortcuts to add these to my scene. So Shift 1 is noise texture, Control Q is a color ramp, it just works a lot faster. I've got an entire video on this, you can check it out. And now I'm going to increase the black parts of this and the white parts. And maybe I want it to be something like this. Increase the detail a little bit, like so. Then I'm going to add a mix color, bring it over here, and this one should be the factor. And now this color should be like a lighter green, something like so. And this color should be a very dark green, something like this. All right, so this doesn't look very good, of course. Doesn't matter, we are going to add a particle system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, cursor to selected, Shift A, new plane. Just going to bring it over here. I'm not entirely sure what the reason is why it doesn't let me select a particle system on the other plane. I'm just going to place it like so. And I will take the other texture just simply by going over here and selecting the green texture that we've made before. So this is the one. Now I'm going to add a particle system, particle, hair, and now we've got some hair on this entire table. Of course, the length is way too long, so I'm going to decrease the length, but I want to increase the amount of them. So children interpolated. And let's see, this is not enough. So I'm going to set the children to 100 in my viewport as well. And it's still a little bit too long, so I'm just going to bring it down ever so slightly. All right, so now that we've got our poker table, I've added a particle system, 5,000 particles, relatively short hair length. I think it can actually be a little bit shorter, 0.005. All right, something like that, just gives it a little bit more detail. I've got my children set to 500. I'm not going to work in the viewport like that. I'm just going to set it to like 50. And now we can see something that's happening. And in the render amount, I'm just going to set it to 500. So that when it renders, it will render it with 500 particles, but in the viewport, we can still work around normally. So actually, I'm just going to set it to 10. Who cares? So now I can move around, which is nice. So I'm going to save this. We could go over into our camera. Right over here, I'm going to add an HDRI. I use the add-on Easy HDRI. And right now we have some pretty cool looking HDRIs. I'm probably going to use this one. Set it to 0.1. I don't want it to be too strong. I just want some reflections in my glass. So I'm going to add a plane right over here. Just going to scale that up. Bring it right beneath our, let's set this to median. And bring it right behind our table, like so. Just going to increase the scale of this so it fits the entire camera. I'm going to select the glass, material, copy material to selected. Now we have a pretty interesting looking background. I'm not entirely sure whether this is the background that I want to be using though, so maybe what we can do is turn this around. I'm going to select my camera itself, depth of field, going to select this part right over there and decrease the focal point. Going into the viewport display, passe partout. Not a big fan of the fact that the glass is entirely gone, even though it has so much detail. Cool, I'm just going to change the texture of this plane, because I do not like that it reflects so much. So we're just going to take the camera and bring it downwards, then bring it up. And let's actually not have any background at all. What about that? I'm going to add a plane right over here, simply to obscure some things right over there. So maybe we can give it a texture. Brick wall would be pretty cool as well. Dark brick wall. Yeah, dark brick wall, why not? Let's give it a try. Something like that. Now I do want it to obscure the entire area. So I'm going to place it something like this. Alt-R, actually R90, RC45. Let's do this the correct way. Something like this. Just going over into the UV editor. Select it, scale it up so that it makes more sense. And now this looks pretty cool if you ask me, but there's a lot of empty space right over here. So what we can do is make some money. Let's go over here, plane, scale it down, scale it something like this. Going over into the shader editor, press new, Control T, add an image texture. In the image, I'm just going to select my 50 euros because I recently made a render with the 15 euros. In the viewport shading, because then we can actually see what we're doing. Cube projection, go over into UV editor, right over here. It's not aligned the right way, R90. Just going to scale it down, scale it on the X. And what do you have? We have our $50 note. Cool, solidify. Now it has a little bit of thickness. It's too much. Just going to decrease it like so. And let's see. It's big as well. Maybe it shouldn't be that wide. It should be something like this. Going over here, give this some geometry. Play around with it. Maybe we can sculpt it even a little bit. Sculpt it something like so. Make sure it's a little bit more randomized. That is money on the table. Make it a little bit smaller. Shift D, RC, just rotate it. Play around with these vertices, make sure it looks a bit more randomized and all. Something like that. Something like this. Rotate it. And now this is a little bit less empty. We can also make some other of these. So just bring it over there. Like so. Rotate it so you can see that it's the same one. And bring this one over to that side. Something like so. And now let's see what it looks like. All right, so this one looks pretty bad. And this one should actually be a little bit more aligned. Still not entirely on the table though, so I'm just going to select both of them and bring them down until it's pretty much on the table. And that kind of makes this render done, I guess. So we can go over here to the camera, give it some depth of field by clicking on depth of field, decreasing this entire range, make sure that it's a little bit less visible. Maybe we can even duplicate this one as well. Go over here, duplicate it, bring it closer to us. Something like this. I'm going to delete the inside. The X, G, Y, bring it over there, bring it something like so. Just to fill up some of that space. Volumetric, Shift A, add in a cube and go over here, bam, shader, editor, new, delete the principled BSDF, volume, principled volume into the volume, decrease the density, something like this. And now we have some atmosphere. Maybe we can even add like a noise texture into this. So add the noise texture to the color ramp, add in a color ramp, of course, and make it something like so, because people are smoking in these kinds of spaces, you know. Now, am I happy with the final result? Am I happy with this? Let's just click on render and see what we've got. All right, now it's time to add the final light, which is going to change the render by a whole lot. So I'm going to duplicate our original area light that we've got right here. And I'm going to place it a little bit backwards. Let's see what it looks like. And Alt R, R, Y, and point it towards the plane like this. And now we can increase the wattage, spread to 0, and now we can see what we're actually doing. I'm going to increase the size of this, set this to median point, scale it up. And now I want to make a texture for this. So I'm heading over into the shader editor and I'm going to click on use nodes right over here. And then I want to make this look like it's a vignette, as if there's the sun shining through a window. So I'm going to press Shift A, wave texture, add it to our shader editor, then plug the color into the strength. All right, we can already see that we have got our lines like a window. But the scale is way too big. So I'm going to turn this down to approximately 1. And I can also use the color ramp to soften it out or make it bigger, stronger, things like that. So let's see what that looks like. It's starting to look pretty cool, but I think there should be some perspective because the sun is probably shining from an angle and not directly from above through a window that's in the ceiling. So I'm going to select this area light. Oh, okay. Where is it? Right over here, RY, and now we actually get some perspective in this entire shot for our lighting. So I'm going to bring it somewhere over here so it shines on the cards just a little bit. And right now this is starting to look pretty good. We can make it wider or bigger, SY, scale it like so. And now the window is approximately that size. And it just gives a lot more depth to the atmosphere and the scene in itself. So you can make it softer or harder by playing around with these values right over here. and just make sure that you make something you like. But this is the basic setup. It's very easy, and you can now use this to make a pretty cool looking lighting setup that actually changes the render by a whole lot. So check this out. This was without the lighting, and now with the extra lighting, it looks a whole lot better. So that's why we did that. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope you learned a lot about modeling, texturing and lighting, but if you want to learn about animation, then I highly recommend watching this video next.